So, in this installment of delving more deeply into the wonderful world of Iboga and Bwiti, we're going to talk about some key concepts, some of my favorite things as a good jumping off point if you're just new to how to engage with the medicine and you're interested perhaps in going to the birthplace of Bwiti. And I hope you are interested in going to the birthplace because really the experience of Iboga is really unparalleled anywhere else in the world. When you're doing it in Gabon, it's just the most sublime experience you can have. But there's some key concepts that we're going to talk about today in this installment, some of the basics of Iboga. And those are bones and fish and turtles and maggots, some key concepts that I really love. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, and it's really, really important when you're engaging with Bwiti, is the concept of bones. So bones, being ancestral bones, are venerated in Bwiti. In fact, the Fang Bwiti people call themselves the fishers of bones. So the reason why they call themselves the fishers of bones is because they save venerated ancestral bones and they keep them in their temples in Gabon and they store them in a container in a basket and it goes down into the ground into the floor, and during ceremonies they fish the basket of bones up out of the ground, and so they call themselves the fishers of bones. So during ceremonies they bring the basket up and out as a means to connect with the venerated ancestors of their community. So it's a mistake to think that the people of Bwiti are cannibals, although a lot of the missionaries that came in the 17, 1800s saw these practices and had a very gross misunderstanding of what was happening. There isn't cannibalism in Bwiti and in Iboga. You don't see that really at all. Like, you don't see really even ritual sacrifice, which happens in a lot of other cultures. But it was a mistake by a lot of missionaries, and of course they were, freaked out when they saw this. But you have to realize that they're looking at it through the lens of like Northern European understanding of bones. And so if you're coming from the West and like myself, you're from America, usually the only association you have with bones is skeletons and Halloween and this macabre idea sort of death and life. And that was really what bones are supposed to evoke when you come from a Celtic culture like I did. Halloween is really a Celtic holiday celebrating the end of the harvest season. And it's the way in which you honor that the season has changed and winter is coming. And so there is this metaphorical death, if you are in the northern hemispheres, that the earth is going to go through. However, when you live in equatorial Gabon, or really anywhere at the equator, you don't have this cycle of life and death in the same way. There is no winter. There is no ominous feeling that's going to come over you because the sun rises and sets at the same time every day. The temperature is very, very consistent year round. So your cycles of life and death in the forest exist in other ways in which you have, for example, predatory animals in the forest that can come at any moment unbeknownst to you and just attack you and end your life. So there's different concepts of life and death that you have when you live in an equatorial climate. So bones are not seen as a bad thing. They also aren't seen as this static representation of death like you might have some conceptions in the North. So, in fact, there's a lot of cultures all over the world that really believe that bones can be reanimated and brought back to life. There's even a passage in the several passages in the Bible, I think Ezekiel is one of them that comes to mind, about reanimating bones. So When you deal with the concept of bones in Bwiti, it's a wonderful, beautiful, celebratory thing. And it's quite interesting, too, if you think about it as a link to the ancestors, because even in science, you do DNA analysis of bones. And of course, bones provide us, records back millions and millions of years when we look at the ancestral bones of other animals, dinosaurs. They really are a record to the past. So they're an amazing, dynamic, beautiful thing. So you embrace them in Bwiti. They're nothing to be scared of or freaked out about. So, um, so that is one of the main concepts in Bwiti, bones, and Bwiti people being the fishers of bones. Um, so there are two also main lineages in Bwiti, just if you're new to this. The oldest lineage is called the Dissumba lineage, and its symbology is the turtle. So when you actually start engaging in Bwiti, you're going to end up in one of these two traditions if you work pretty much with anybody who's been initiated into the plant medicine in Gabon. They will have come through their awareness and their understanding of Bwiti through one of these two traditions. Again, Dissumba is the turtles. That's the oldest lineage. And Dissumba gives rise to the second lineage called the Missouko, which are the fish or the catfish. So fishes and turtles are everywhere, symbolically all over the culture of Bwiti. And the distinction between the Dissumba and the catfish is very complex, but in general, you can make the general analysis that the Missouko religion, the catfish, they're really seen as the master healers of the tradition. So, for example, if you are somebody that's suffering from multiple sclerosis, you do very well in most cases to go and seek out a healer in the Missouko tradition. Not just obviously with multiple sclerosis, there are everything, schizophrenia, all sorts of ailments, infertility, psychological issues. There's a, sort of infinite list of things that people do really well with when they go for healing in Iboga. And the Dissumba tradition, which is the tradition that I'm initiated into, it's more, I guess you could say, mystical tradition, but I also find it to be incredibly powerfully healing as well. So it's not, at the end of the day, like one or the other won't give you the healing that you need. But I always just suggest to people, when you're first starting out, I think it's best to just use your intuition and see, just analyze yourself and see, like, what do you feel more called to? Like, and if you're seeing obviously images in your mind of fish, or you're seeing images of turtles, that's one of the ways that you could probably say that the ancestors are guiding you into an understanding of which direction to go. So we have bones, we have turtles, and we have fish. And then the other concept that's really important in Bwiti is maggots. So this, you'll hear this term all the time in Bwiti where they say Basse, 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 Basse. And Basse literally means maggot. So, so it's just another, like, pretty macabre thing if you are coming from an outside looking in sort of perspective. But the concept of maggot is one of impermanence. And so it's literally, the concept that after you die, your flesh gets eaten by maggots, or it gets eaten by worms, or whatever. So it's really their way of saying and affirming this whole process of life and death. And so a lot of times people have more static ideas about life and death and what's important, but when you're actually engaging with Bwiti, it's always best to just understand that Bwiti really always is loving that cosmic dance of life and death, and seeing them as interconnected principles in the exact same way that the Taoist sees that the yin and the yang are necessary elements that need each other. So they see life and death as interrelated and cyclical. And at the end of the day, you can't really have one with the other. As one of my teachers used to say very succinctly, talking about life here on planet Earth, if nothing dies, then nothing lives because nothing can eat. So Bwiti is always into that cosmic transformation and that play of life and death. So a lot of people say all the time, oh, I'm afraid to do Iboga because I heard that you might die on it. And if you were to go to Africa and say that and through a translator to somebody that was a Buddhist, they'd be very confused by what you're saying because they actually believe spiritually that you actually do die when you do an Iboga ceremony, that your soul dies, that your ego dies, that this concept of who you were as an individual literally dies and you are born again. So when you become a Bonzi, you are this person that's literally reborn into Bwiti. So it's a little bit confusing if you try to talk about life and death in these very absolute values, that you're alive right now and then you're dead, and then in the Western the Western Judeo-Christian tradition, we see them as two separate things, right? So you're alive right now, you die, and then you go to a heaven realm, and there's just part one and the transition, and then part two, and they're static. But they're dynamic and interrelated, of course, in Bwiti. So to use the word death is a little bit of a conundrum for people in Bwiti. And so I hope this helps if you are planning a trip to Gabon and you're interested in exploring the multitude of ways in which Bwiti and Iboga can help you. Just remember that bones are really wonderful things. And when somebody says to you, Basse, you say Basse back. So Basse, Basse. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this installment and have a beautiful day.